Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. Thank you for coming to this event we have here on behalf of the IIP. I want to welcome you. My name is SWOBODA. I'm president of the IIP. Thank you for coming. Thank you, the team of IIP, with Stephanie Fenker at the head of that team, for organizing this event and organizing the small Christmas celebration we have afterwards. Why do we deal with this subject, especially with the Western Balkans, since many years already? It's not new. I think as an international institute situated in Austria, I think it seems to be self-evident. Look at our history, closely connected with the region, with some positive elements, but also negative ones. Think about the First World War, which resulted from our connection and our linkage to the region. And of course, we are convinced that Europe is incomplete as long as the Western Balkans is outside the European Union. But we have also migration as a subject. Our economy, our social services would not be sustainable without migration, for example, or especially from that region. That does not mean that it should be forever like this, but we still don't know what we would do, for example, in Austria and some other countries, without migration from this area. And this gives us also some responsibility for fighting together for common Europe and fighting together also for democracy and democratic development. And finally, we are, because it's about losing ground or winning ground, is about our deep conviction that only together we can gain ground, or together we would lose ground, but we rather want to gain ground for common Europe with so many threats and challenges around us, from the war against Ukraine by Russia, by influence of China from the other hand, and from development of Trump land, also with a very dangerous connection between politics and tech companies and influencing the public event. I think it is very important that Europe has its own position and its own development, and this only can be done together with the Western Balkans, and that's the reason we, together with the Balkan Forum and the Karl-Renner-Institut and the IIP, where VEDRAN is here chairing, we organized this event, and thank you very much for coming. And I hand over to the next.
To me?
Please.
Thank you, Hannes.
It's nearly like the Three Kings from another.
I prepared this small letter here because I don't do speeches a lot, so bear with me, I think, to continue. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and friends, it's a privilege to stand before you in this important gathering, to continue with our great talks that we started in the morning with 2 workshops, and also tonight concluding with this wonderful settings. It's a privilege and gratitude and excitement for me to be part of this group. The topics we aim to tackle, or we tackled today, but also tonight, they are not just about EU and Western Balkans policies or politics. They're more about people, about children, about our communities. This event is not just one of the panel discussion. It's a call for action, call for mobility, and most importantly, it's a space for hope. The Western Balkans stands as the crossroads, as does much of Europe. Rising nationalist sentiments threaten to pull us backward, but we have an opportunity, an obligation to move forward, to build bridges and not walls, to choose dialogue over division, to imagine a region not defined by its past struggles, but by its future possibilities. And what is that future? To me, It is one where progressive visionary leaders emerge, not leaders who act because they are cornered or threatened, but because leaders who believe, who want to do the change. Leaders who are driven by conviction, not pressure. Leaders who understand that sustainable peace, economic development, and regional stability are not just superior goals, but the very foundation of a brighter tomorrow. I think such leadership requires courage, imagination, and above all, a commitment to change. Not for their own sake, but because it's the only path to unlocking the full potential of our people and our region. I must say that ending long-lasting conflicts in the Western Balkans is not an easy work. But I'm confident that everyone that we met today and here in this room share a belief that the Balkans can and must be a beacon of stability, a hub of innovation, and a proud partner within the European community. So let us not leave here with only discussion or declaration, as that is what our politicians do best. Let us leave with a recommendation for tangible solutions. Thank you for being here, for bringing your expertise, your passion and hope. I think together we can create that kind of future that we and generations to come deserve. Thank you very much for coming.
Good evening and welcome also from my side on behalf of the Karl-Renner-Institut, the fourth institution that is organizing this event. This event is organized in the framework of the initiative Young Generations for the New Western Balkans, an initiative that we already founded 6 years ago. And the aim of this initiative was and is to create a vision for an alternative Balkan that is progressive, democratic, anti-authoritarian, prosperous. And after 6 years, the aim and the vision of this progressive, prosperous, democratic Western Balkans is still valid, more valid than ever before. And we all know that even in the European Union, with the Orbans, etc., we still have things that we need to change in order to have a common Europe that sticks to its values, as I mentioned, democracy, also rule of law, human rights, etc. So also in this regard, this event is important, and I should be brief. So I think I now hand over to VEDRAN before I say once again thank you to the cooperation partners, the International Institute for Peace, the Austrian Institute for International Affairs, and the Balkan Forum for the good cooperation we've had for 6 years. And now, VEDRAN, the floor is yours, and I wish you a fruitful debate.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Hannes, GAZMEND, and Gerhard. Good evening from my side. I think it's a huge Christmas party for the Western Balkans. It's really nice to see so many of you tonight at the International Institute for Peace. And the competition between the Christmas markets and the Western Balkans clearly was won by the Western Balkans. So we did the first step on the way towards progressive and good future. But on a serious note, I think the event comes at an important time when it comes to the Western Balkans, but also when it comes to the fate of Europe. Hannes, GAZMEND, and Gerhard mentioned the buzzwords: democracy, autocracy, hope, fear, progress. Are we standing still? Real solutions, GAZMEND, not empty promises. And when we look back at the history of the relations between the European Union and the Western Balkans, it has been a long story. The process of the European integration starting in 2000, after the end of the war in Kosovo. It has been 24 years of the process of the European integration, which certainly for all the other enlargement rounds so far is the biggest amount of time that we have spent to democratize and to bring the countries of the Western Balkans closer to the European Union. And now we stand in 2024 in a very delicate geopolitical and historical moment. Trump is going to take over soon. We have the rise of far right in the European Union, in this country particularly too. We have still an ongoing war in Ukraine. Russian Federation is waging the war and continuing. So we have turbulences all around. So the question is, what is in the sea of turbulences happening to small regions like the Western Balkans? Or is this, or to put it in other words, is this the place where the EU can prove that it is functional, that it can deliver, that it can be important from the geopolitical point of view? We have a wonderful panel tonight, a big panel tonight, and I guess there will be a lot of questions from your side. Let's have an open and an honest discussion, a crispy one. So please, that goes both for the panelists, but also for you. No monologues of 15 minutes, but answers to the point. And I'll introduce the panel in a second, and you will see we have, first of all, young voices. We have voices from almost all parts of the region, and some of the participants that took part in the workshops today are sitting among us from the region. So there will be, I think, a lot of interesting input. So let me introduce from my right side to the left, first sitting squeezed between the door and Tara, BRANIMIR JOVANOVIĆ from the Vienna Institute for International Economic Studies, from North Macedonia originally, or born in Macedonia, but the country turned into North Macedonia. He still is a proud Macedonian, but first of all, an excellent expert in economics and in socio-economic developments of the Western Balkans. And I think sometimes we forget to look at that particular angle, and we are happy to have BRANIMIR among us. Next to BRANIMIR, and she's really squeezed between two big boys. It's Tara TEPAVAC. Tara was previously working for the NGO CRTA, that you might know. CRTA is or has been quite important in observing or checking up on the Serbian elections in December, and produced a very important report on the elections. But Tara has moved on. She's now research assistant at the Institute for Philosophy and Social Theory at the University of Belgrade. And she was, I have to say, today in the workshop, the most optimistic one among us. So that's something new, coming from Serbia and being the most optimistic. FILIP MILAČIĆ, senior researcher at the Friedrich Ebert Foundation, working on democracy, nationalism, political parties, polarization, comes from Montenegro, and as Montenegro is a front runner in the EU integration, you see he's smiling, happy face. Montenegro is going to join soon, and Filip is ready to share Tara's optimism. In the middle sits MARIGONA, SHABIU from the Youth Initiative for Human Rights. Hopefully I don't need to remind you of the importance of a youth initiative for human rights all across the Western Balkans. The Youth Initiative for Human Rights did a tremendous job in the last few years, focusing on dealing with the past, on overcoming hatred, nationalism, bringing young generations together and fighting for something which is a core of democracy, liberal values, human rights, fundamental rights. So, Marigona, thank you for being with us. Last but not least, not so much squeezed, we have a lot of place, is Thomas STÖLZL from the Austrian Ministry for European International Affairs, and he is heading the unit for Southeastern Europe. And this week, Thomas and I just discussed, has been a particularly busy one. And let me, I wanted to start with Serbia and the optimism, but as we have you here, and I think there are different visions and perceptions of the process of the EU integration, independence where you look at. I mean, I was in Brussels 2 weeks ago. The message that you get in Brussels is a particular one. When you travel across the region, you get different views and perspectives from political elites, stakeholders, from civil society, from activists. And I think the Austrian Ministry for Foreign Affairs has put a lot of work into promoting the European integration. Thomas, a quick, crispy first round of questions. From your point of view, what's right now at stake, and how do you see the whole process? Are we moving towards final goal, at least for Montenegro and Albania? Where do we stand?
Thank you so much, and thank you for the organizers, and good evening from my side. I'm also very happy to see so many people at this very timely discussion. I try to be very brief, but this is really, it's always the same. This last week before Christmas is the enlargement week, so to say, in Brussels. There was today an intergovernmental conference with Montenegro, where for the first time in many years, real chapters were closed. And I will spare you the details, but this is a real milestone to see actually, and to show also to the region that the process actually is working. There's another conference with Albania tomorrow, also opening a further cluster. It's a very technical process. We have still discussions. It's actually the ambassadors are meeting right now about, there's still some open issues about Serbia, Kosovo, some others, because tomorrow the Ministers for Europe will meet in the General Affairs Council. And normally these texts are agreed, at least they should be ready by Friday, but they are still open. So they will have a ministerial discussions tomorrow about these points, which also shows that enlargement is kind of the comeback kit a bit also in Brussels, because it was a long time, it was very dormant. There is an EU Western Balkans summit on Wednesday also, and just some hours ago, the Austrian foreign minister presented a common letter by 7 foreign ministers of the European Union, the so-called Friends of the Western Balkans, which is a group of like-minded countries, Austria, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Croatia, Slovenia, Greece, and Italy, where we put our vision, what we want to see with enlargement, to the new High Representative Kallas and to the new Commissioner Kos for the next institutional cycle. And what we want to see is real progress in the enlargement so that people draw tangible benefits. And I will not go into the details, but 2 years ago we presented a non-paper in Brussels about gradual integration. So because now you're either a member state or you're a third country. And we have to break this dichotomy a bit, and we have to make some advantages of EU integration already to provide them to the countries when in the process of enlargement. Because there's huge economic potential there. 2 years ago we were very alone. Now we have the growth plan by the European Commission, where this gradual integration is front and center and is actually already implemented. We will see implementation of the reform agendas, where we have additional 6 billion euros to spend for the next 3 years in the region, where we have clear benchmarks. You have to make this law, this law, this law, and then you will get additional funds. So there's a lot more dynamism. But of course, you're right, we're a bit late in the game. It's 21 years after Thessaloniki. And the process was broken. If you need, there was a new methodology, 2020. If you need something like a methodology for a process, it tells you already that the process is obviously not working very well. Because it was, for a long time, it was a bureaucratic excuse where people in the region were, rightly so, saying, yeah, but what's changing? What's changing? But the dynamics, I think, have changed now, especially with having Montenegro back as a front runner, where the aim of the government is to be finished by 2026, and that's a goal that is attainable. That's possible. It's doable. Also, Albania is progressing very well. We know with Serbia there's still open discussion, because we also are very arguing for opening of cluster 3, also to keep Serbia engaged, and I will not go in, we can later on maybe go into the details, so I think it has changed, but we have to keep on pushing, and we as Austria are pushing, but, and this is also our appeal also from the region, we cannot do it alone, because we need to see also progress from the region and the reforms in the region, and they have to come from the countries themselves. It doesn't, they should not be like a rule book and then you cross just the things, they should come organically out of the countries themselves, and this would help us then to convince some more skeptic member states, because they may have changed the tone a bit, but when you go down to the technical level, it's some things never change, and but we are fighting hard. So we try.
Great. Let's take these two takeaways. We are fighting hard. That's for the Austrian side, and secondly, there is a new dynamism. And then, Marigona, I would like to ask you from the Kosovo's perspective, which was not mentioned right now, and we know that Kosovo faces particular challenges due to the open dispute with Serbia, but also due to the fact that it is lagging behind the other countries. At the same time, there are still measures or so-called sanctions of the European Union against Kosovo. So when you hear new dynamism from Brussels, how does it look from the Kosovo's perspective, and particularly from the perspective of the Kosovo youth? Is the EU the big promise on the horizon after so many years? And what's the game that's played in Kosovo itself?
Yeah, thank you, Vedran. I think thank you so much, everyone, for coming and for joining, and of course for showing interest in our region, in our countries. It really means a lot in December to kind of like have these very heavy topics. But I think it's for us it's very important that you know, like, we're not alone in our fight for democracy and human rights in our countries, and that we have allies and partners in neighboring countries, in other countries throughout European Union that are kind of like backing up us and also supporting us in this fight. And when it comes to, you know, like Kosovo, Kosovo's past to EU accession, EU integration, I would say that I think it's a known fact that kind of like the EU love in Kosovo, and especially among young people, is the highest in the region. So there is this very strong sentiment generally among the population for EU and EU integration and the process itself, even though in the past years there has been, you know, like a lot of injustices towards the Kosovo people with regards to, firstly, visa liberalization. You know, we were the last ones in the region to join this process and to get visa-free regime within the Schengen zone. And even though Kosovo had fulfilled like all the criteria and more criteria than any other country in the region, we were still kind of like stuck in the process. And finally this year we got this visa liberalization, and that has impacted kind of like this the increase in EU skepticism, even though I'm saying still it's relatively high. And the other thing is, now with the recent or the current sanctions or measures imposed by EU, and a lot of people in Kosovo, and especially young people, feel that, of course, these are unfair. And I think these are unfair because we see that, of course, Kosovo is not being the best, let's say, player in when it comes to Kosovo-Serbia dialogue or Kosovo-Serbia relations. But then we also have Serbia and Serbia's regime kind of like, in a way, not respecting the agreements, directly interfering and messing up into Kosovo's, like the Banjska attack, and the fact that the main perpetrator of this attack that happened last year is free in Serbia. It really tells a lot, and it's a very concerning fact. But we still don't have, like any sanctions or measures imposed on Serbia, while we have on Kosovo. So I think it's kind of like this unfair treatment between the two. But on the other hand, I think that the Kosovo's government has kind of like is trying to tick the boxes on a lot of reforms, on a lot of steps in order to proceed or move ahead in the accession process. But of course, compared to the other countries in the region, I think we are the last ones, also because of the very fragile democracy, very, even though you reminded me today that it's still kind of like based on some international rankings, it stands in the best position, but still because of this unresolved issue with Serbia, I think that's gonna continue to keep us and to leave us behind. Of course, I mean, for us and for young people in Kosovo, it's a good thing that they still believe in, like this. The moral compass is still the EU, but then when we see what is happening to a lot of EU countries, then we are also kind of like questioning ourselves. Is this the EU that we want to join, with a lot of countries, like left-wing parties gaining ground, and with a lot of like anti-rights, anti-gender movements spreading around, and with the oppression of activist voices in a lot of these countries, oppression of LGBTI communities, of women, and the Muslim migrants. So it's really, is this, and also we had this discussion today of like, having EU as a concept, as a project, but also what are some of the EU countries currently doing to preserve and to maintain this project that has started initially. I think that, of course, Kosovo has a long path. I think it's going to be a painful, lengthy road for us to join the EU, but I hope that by the time we reach there, it's at least it's not going to be this EU that we are seeing in a lot of like EU countries, and it's going to be actually the EU that was initially envisioned, and like the values of democracy, of rule of law, and human rights for all, without this selective approach. It's going to be still there waiting, like waiting for us, and these values
we have to
trying to be imposed on us, while we don't see them in a lot of EU countries, sadly, and it's like this decline in democracy. So yeah.
So we have to. I mean, it's before Christmas. We have to pray for the Western Balkans, but we also have to pray for the European Union.
Yes.
To still be there when the Western Balkans is ready to join. There is this. I mean, there is one of the best joke tellers from Bulgaria lives in this city, Ivan Krastev, and he used to tell this joke all the time about the pessimists and optimists when it comes to the EU integration. And I probably put it wrong now, but I mean, he said, like, optimists are those that believe that Turkey is going to join the European Union during the Council's presidency of Albania, and vice versa. Then the pessimists are those that believe that Albania is going to join during the Turkish presidency of the Council of the European Union. And that might require a lot of prayers to happen. But in any case, I mean, what we see here are like different of course, different starting points. When the process of European integration started and when the promise of Thessaloniki came in 2003, Kosovo was still a protectorate of the United Nations. It became independent only 2008. So it's a kind of a different stakes on the table in comparison to let's say Croatia, Slovenia. They had kind of a more easy path. As Kosovo unwillingly or willingly has this dispute and open question with Serbia, and Serbia has been a very, to put it under quotation marks, dynamic society recently. The dynamism that we see right now on the streets of Belgrade, and you probably have been following the events in Belgrade and in Serbia. Recently there was an event in Novi Sad when the roof of the main railway station collapsed, which allegedly or obviously was reconstructed by a dubious kind of a network of companies, and 15 people were killed. And when that happened, that triggered, similar to the events of this kind of a mass killings in the Belgrade school in May 2023, that triggered huge protests on the streets of many Belgrade cities. And we have, like, the last 2 weeks, have seen a new surge of protests by students, by young people. And the last time that we had death numbers of young students on the streets of Belgrade was back in the 90s, in 2000, when Milošević regime was toppled down. So that was the source of optimism when Tara was presenting and discussing the Serbian case today in the morning. Tara, my question would be, can you assess a little bit the new protests, and also say a word or two on the big, huge, and very present animal, under quotation marks, being the regime of Aleksandar Vučić. And we just had recently a kind of a news of statistics that he appeared in front of the TV stations, like full-fledged TV appearances, 322 times until today in the year 2024. But he still has 2 more weeks to go, so he can catch up. So this kind of the regime where it stands, which sometimes we have an impression is cuddling, or the EU is cuddling with Aleksandar Vučić, and protests at the same time. Is this the new wind of change, and what could potentially all that mean for the EU integration of Serbia?
Thank you.
I know a lot of questions.
No, it's a lot of questions. Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be with you here today and discuss all of these really tough questions in the windy Vienna. And maybe I will start with I was really happy to hear the call for the real reforms on the ground, which is coming from the European Union, because I think this is the same call as you can hear at the moment in Serbia by the students and by the citizens. And this is the source of my optimism. So in Serbia at the moment, you can hear the students and the citizens for already a couple of years in a row going on the streets, blocking either streets or at the moment universities and faculties, and demanding what is known as democratic values and European values. So calling for democracy, calling for real anti-corruption reforms, calling for real democratic functioning of institutions and processes, literally being in the same boat of fighting for democracy as we were hearing today. But before going to the optimistic part, I would maybe start with a bit of dose of realistic pessimism. And I would maybe start from a bigger picture. Today we were discussing a lot about where we stand in the region, but also in the wider circles regarding the state of democracy. And I wanted to start from maybe zooming out a bit and then saying at the moment while this is happening in Serbia, I was looking a bit on the varieties of democracy reports for 2024 and on the state of democracy globally. So I think that we cannot perceive what is going on in the region of the Western Balkans outside of the reality of a bigger picture of context. And the context is that almost all components of democracy are worsening in more countries than they are getting better by the latest Varieties of Democracy report. If you have had a look, compared to 10 years ago, there is the largest share of world's population which is living in autocratic or autocratizing countries at the moment than those which are in the countries which are in the process of democratization. And this is the largest share since 2009. And we have 1/3 of the world's population which is living in autocratizing countries at the moment. So when we talk about autocratizing trends and tendencies, this is not only a problem, as we can see, of the Western Balkans any longer. This is a problem also of Eastern Europe, where you have 66% of population which are living in something which is called electoral democracies, autocracies, and also 32% of countries which are in the process of substantial decline in Eastern Europe. So under these kind of circumstances, what is actually the thing that the people in the Western Balkan need to hear in order to really push more for the reforms? They need to see that they have alliances in Europe as well in their demands of democratic reforms and democratic functioning of institutions and processes. And I think that at this stage, we are at the moment in which we need to really redefine what democracy means and what European values are, because from time to time, it seems that we are a bit losing the picture of what democratic values are, and if these are the values that the European Union is really promoting, and who is promoting it, and who is standing along with the citizens who are demanding this kind of institutions, democratic values, the democratic reforms and processes on the streets. So when we were talking today, one of the things that I wanted to note is that at the moment what our citizens would need to hear and to see is that three things. One is that we need more networks, we need more solidarity and more alliances on all levels among European Union countries, but also European Union citizens, communities, academia, businesses, civil societies, and with also with the communities which are coming from the Western Balkans. And we need more participation. And this leads me now to what is going on at the moment in Serbia. As Vedran was saying, we are having the largest scale protests of students since the 1996 and 97 protests. It's really funny because if you look at it from a statistical perspective, and I'm a researcher, so to some extent I like statistics, it happens that every 28 years we have a cycle of huge student protests. We had ones in 68, and yes, and now we have a new generation. And now you would ask me, what is new? What is news when I say that we have protests in Serbia? Yes, we have protests almost every year in Serbia. This is not a novel thing. Last year we had, I was having a bit of a glance on more statistics. So last year in 2023, after the huge tragedy that we had with mass shooting in the school of Ribnikar, we had more than 170 protests in more than 40 towns and municipalities across Serbia. So the novelty is that in the last couple of years, we had a huge number of different kind of scaled protests, but they are rising not only with the numbers, they're also spreading through the country with more and more cities being engaged. The new thing from this time, which is happening, is that these protests are not led by the opposition, they're not led by the political parties, they're led by the students. We have students which have been raising their voices, asking for anti-corruption reforms, asking for democratic institutions to do their work, for judiciary to get things done, to start opening up the files, to start processing the culprits. They demanded institutional accountability, political accountability by the leaders who were leading the reforms, who were also in charge of the ministries, who were in charge of these kind of reconstructions that have been taking place. So this is a new thing. The students entered into blockages, and I can say that up to this date, we have all the faculties of the Belgrade University and University of Novi Sad, which are under blockages. So more than 40 faculties are in the protest at the moment. And they're not alone, because in the last 10 days or so, they are being supported by artists, by professors, even by the rectorate of the University of Belgrade. Now, from today and yesterday, gymnasiums are going into strikes. Agricultural workers are standing next to them, as well as lawyers and other parts of the community. The main thing why I am being a bit optimistic, cautiously optimistic, is that their demands are not to have any kind of political leaders standing up. they're demanding institutional responsibility. And for me, this is one of the things which is new. And although there is a lot of problems and we have to see to which direction this kind of protest will lead, I'm optimistic because I think this kind of mobilization is a great response to apathy that we have been seeing, and it shows that the younger generations, despite all the narratives in which they have been growing up, still can distinguish what real democratic values mean. And they're standing and raising their voices in a non-violent protests, in citizen participative manners, and they're demanding their voice to be heard. So I guess for this moment I would stop.
Thank you, Tara. That's great. Just a quick follow-up question regarding the huge debate that also was followed here by the Austrian media on the lithium mining. I mean, let's put it differently. What would you say if an expert would argue that the EU is trading democracy and democratic values for the sake of resources like lithium in Serbia? What will be your response? Is it true, or do we need to see it through different eyes? Or
I think this is it's a great question. Thank you. It's also one of the things that it connects to what I was just saying. So the protests that we have been seeing, these are the protests by the students now. But one of the latest, the previous mass mobilization was made by the whole question of lithium mining in Serbia. And this was also one of the protests in which we could see, and we talked about it today a lot, a huge mobilization across the region of the Western Balkans in which you had solidarity among environmental activists which were standing together. The question here is not only if the lithium itself should be mined. The main question here is under which circumstances, in what context you are able to make such a decision. So the people and the environmental activists in Serbia are worried and they're against this approach itself in the context in which you have autocratizing power, which is deciding in their own ways without hearing the voices of the citizens. And the answer to your question is it can only be made if you look if the European Union will support the process of reaching this kind of decision by the citizens, if this will be a decision which will be made by the citizens through the democratic institutions that work, or it will be something which will be imposed by the institutions which are not allowing citizens' voices to be heard. And I maybe made it a bit difficult, but the reason why I'm putting it this way is that there was a lot of demands by the citizens to open up the question on, for instance, lithium mining in the parliament, in the committees of the parliament that should be in charge of this. And there is no space for a genuine democratic debate among the citizens on if it should be mined or not, and in which context it should be mined, and by which ways, and if there are institutions which can really do a quality control that can ensure that the environment is kept safe, and that is in allowing them to reach this kind of a decision through a participatory democratic procedure. Without participatory and democratic procedure, without institutions which allow for this kind of debate in Serbia, and without accountable institutions which can guarantee that lithium is being mined in line with all high quality standards, this should not at all be a question. This is my answer.
Thanks. It might be that we want to pick up on these questions later on in the Q&A. Now to Philip. I mean, all of us, we have multiple identities, and your multiple identities, probably political scientist and Montenegrinian living in Vienna. And I think the political scientist identity is a strong one, as you are just finishing a new book. It's going to be out soon on the question, are the people abandoning democracy for the nation? Looking at a set of different countries, including some countries from the Western Balkans. And I would love to have a sentence or two on your assumption. Are the people abandoning democracy for the nation? Because we still have an ongoing nationalist narratives being dominant in the Western Balkans. But my first question would be, as Tara mentioned the institutions several times, and I think institutions are key prerequisites for being able to fulfill the EU-related reforms. reforms. So if the institutions are not accountable, sound, not functional, so there will be no changes. From your point of view, when you look at the Western Balkans in a kind of a broader picture, do you see this? What's the role of institutions? Are they captured, and to what degree? And are the institutions as we have them today, from the political scientist point of view, really able to deliver reforms according not only to the standards but also to the values and norms of the European Union? So that, and then are people abandoning democracy for the nation? Easy questions for 5 minutes.
Both of them, very easy. First of all, thank you for this lovely event, and thank you for the invitation. VEDRAN mentioned the best tellers of jokes in the town, Ivan Krastev, and I'm gonna try to emulate him by candidating myself for the second best one.
Even though Montenegrins are not famous for jokes, these are Bosnians, but
exactly.
We don't want to compete here.
Exactly. So for a while there was a joke that the EU had a particular approach towards the Balkans. Meaning that it would say to Balkan political leaders, you pretend that you reform and we'll pretend that we want you. So luckily this is not the case anymore. So luckily my home country opened three chapters today or yesterday, which is really a huge step towards EU membership. However, of course, the goal was 10 or lately even 4, but it didn't happen. But what is the positive message is that the EU is back, I would say. And the EU, there is really this sense, and that there is really a sentiment that now it's serious. Now it's really serious. How will this affect the political processes in the Balkans and also the institutions VEDRAN mentioned? I think that there are many countries, and including my home country, they are still characterized by many democratic deficiencies that will not be, it's not going to be an easy task to improve these democratic deficiencies. And one of those deficiencies is the institutions that are not delivering, and institutions that are very much captured by political elites, and that are also misused by political elites for their personal gains. Unfortunately, this is still the case also in my home country. I can tell you one example. In the regime that before 2020, this regime was marked by widespread clientelism, and 4 years later, nothing has been done about it. I think one example will speak for itself. I don't know whether if you knew this, but Montenegro has the Ministry for Oil and Gas. So now you're thinking maybe, oh gosh, I had no idea that Montenegro is rich with oil and gas. Well, it's not. It doesn't have a single drop of oil and gas, and it has the Ministry for Oil and Gas. Because this is pure clientelism, because you need to place loyalists, party activists, within state administration to provide them with jobs. And of course, then we cannot talk about efficient institutions, about the state with an output, about the state that delivers. So I think this is a big problem, and we really need support there from the EU. I'm not talking only about Montenegro, I'm talking about all countries in the Western Balkans, because we know from the history that only when they are really pushed by the EU, that they will then implement reforms. Otherwise, I'm not very optimistic that they will do it. This is why I'm very happy that my home country is on the way towards membership, but I would also be cautious there. And I think that the EU membership should be used to reform the countries, so and that some deficiencies should be repaired within this process, and not only tolerated for some other, I would say, geopolitical interests.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, but you still owe me the answer on, are the people abandoning democracy for the nation? I mean, that's from my, I mean, I have in my heart, I have the Austrian half and the Bosnian half, and I ask for my Austrian half. Are the people in Austria abandoning democracy for the sake of a fiction of a pure Austrian nation? No, but you have a set of, I think it's an interesting point. If you just can say 2 or 3 sentences on your book project.
I do believe that is the case, and not only in the Western Balkans, but in many Western European countries, because we are still, we still do not understand. Sometimes we are keep getting surprised when the nationalist forces win the election. So not only that they gain a lot of votes in Austria, but also, for example, in the United States, as the latest example, the Trump's platform was very much based on nationalist appeals. And we are always kind of surprised, wow, why is this the case? Because we still do not understand the essence of nationalism, and the essence of nationalism are emotions. So they are appealing to these emotions, primarily the emotions of fear. So they are portraying their country as endangered by a significant, by a particular outgroup or threat, and then they portray themselves as the ones who are here to protect and save the country from that threat. And we know from social psychology, we know that when people feel threatened, they do not act rationally, they act irrationally, and they accept much more things that usually they would accept if those things are presented as necessary sacrifice for addressing these threats. So what can we, and this is the case in the Balkans, because if you look at the narrative of Vučić, he's every day saying that there is a big crisis out there. Third World War will start soon. Everybody is pressuring Serbia. There is an imminent threat here, and I am here fighting for Serbia. I'm safeguarding Serbia. This is a pure strategy. And this, you can see a very similar narrative in many countries, in many countries in Europe. And what can we do about it is the other question. We also need to play with the emotions, because we cannot do anything. If somebody feels threatened for her own existence, you cannot address these fears with a €100 klima bonus. So what, for example, in Austria had been tried. So it will not resonate. You need a counter narrative that resonates, that is also based on emotions, that is also based on these issues that the other side is addressing. So I think, and finish with this, I think, yes, in a certain context, people are abandoning democracy for the nation, but we can do much about it, and we are not doing it.
I think this is something that we discussed in the morning quite intensely, the role of emotions, actually, how the emotion of fear is instrumentalized not only in the Western Balkans but across Europe in this trend of the rise of the far right, which creates a kind of a new far right international where the Balkans is part of it. Anyway, Branimir, now to the socio-economic or economic point of view, which I think is fundamental and crucial to the process of the EU integration. When the EU integration kicked off in 2000, the promise was convergence. So you just open up your economies, market economy reforms. It takes time, it takes sacrifice, but then there will be the land of milk and honey. Not really Switzerland, because Switzerland is not member state of the European Union, but at least some small Germany or Slovenia or Slovakia. And convergence is not happening at the pace as we hoped back then in 2000. So that's one. But the EU and still puts a lot of, or puts resources into reaching this kind of a convergence, and the growth package, growth plan was mentioned, the 6 billion. In the meantime, we have different players that have entered the game. China, most prominently with huge investments, but also other players. So now from 2024 perspective of economists, looking into statistics, but also having this sound political and societal view on the region. What will be your take? Where do we stand and where we are heading to in terms of prosperity? Are we going to see the flying taxis in Belgrade in 2027 or not yet?
Well, we might see the taxis, but that won't make us our lives better. So what I want to say here, last year I was invited to some panel in Belgrade on about the future of the region, how the region will look like in 2030. And I told everyone, like, close your eyes for 7 seconds, open them, and that's how the region will look like in 7 years. Because I mean, it's a bad joke, but yeah. But I mean, the idea is that nothing ever changes in the Balkans, and if it changes, it's for the worse. Just look at the data. I mean, look at, for example, you mentioned convergence. The measure of convergence of the Western Balkans today, the income per capita as a share of percentage of GDP average today is 44%. So average Balkan person has income that allows her to consume, to spend around 44% or less than one half of what the average European is spending. 10 years ago, the share was 40%. So in 10 years' time, we managed to close just 4 percentage points of the gap. And if you extrapolate this trend, you'll see that we'll need around 150 years to get to the EU average. Of course, you can say, like, if you play with a little bit with the numbers, maybe it won't be 150 years, but the best estimate I've seen is around 75 years, which probably, by then the planet will be uninhabitable, perhaps. There are other examples, like, for example, if you see how many people are leaving the Balkans, like the Western Balkans are losing like 100,000 people every year. So 10 years ago, we were 18 million. Now we are 17 million. In 10 years' time, we'll be 16 million. So we're losing. I mean, look at us. I mean, half of us here are probably from the Balkans, living abroad. So, I mean, yeah, there are many things like that. So, of course, the story is not optimistic at all. Why is that happening? That's the real question. We know that it's gloomy. We don't need, anybody, any economist or whatever to tell us that it's gloomy. We know that. The real question is, why is that and what should be done? So why is that? I would say it's because the relationship, like the attitude of the European Union towards the Balkans has not been sincere ever, and also that the Balkan politicians were also never sincere about improving the lives of their citizens. Let me criticize a bit the European Union. You mentioned EU is investing a lot of money. No, it's not investing a lot of money. EU is actually, it's investing something, but it's getting much more than it is investing. So if you look, for example, how much money the Balkans are getting from EU budget, that's as a share of GDP, it's around 1%. In the last 10, 15 years, the Western Balkans got around 1% of their GDP from the EU budget, like IPA funds. If you look how much the current member states from Central Europe are getting, that's around 3% of GDP, 3 times more as a share of GDP. In nominal amounts, it's 100 times more. But you see that it's much, much more. And we have done studies, and not just us, but other people as well, which shows that the main reason why the Central European countries, which are member states of the EU, caught up to the EU level of development, like, for example, Slovenia, which is at around 90% of EU average, are EU money, EU funds. So the direct way that you can support the convergence of the Western Balkans is through giving more money to the region, as it is giving to the other member states, but we don't see it coming. Of course, you can also argue that the money that the EU is investing, not as a political entity, but as an economic entity, is much greater in terms of FDI than through budget money. And yeah, that's true. The Western Balkans attract every year around 6% of their GDP of FDI, most of it coming from the EU. So if you look at how much money European companies are investing in the Western Balkans, that's around 5 times more than the EU is giving from its budget. So you can say, yes, the story is, if you look at EU budget, the story is incomplete. Western companies, EU companies are investing much more in the region. Yes, that's true. But if you look how much money they're getting from the region, like we have also done a study on this, the EU companies that invest in the Balkans get their money back in 3, 4, 5 years, something like that. So the billions they're investing in the region, they return them in maybe 5 years on average. And after that, they just start making profits. So it's really, not an honest relationship. It's pretty much, I would use this word, I'm not a diplomat, I'm free to say, I would say it's a pretty neo-colonial relationship, and we have to admit it, we have to acknowledge it, and we have to change it. That's from the EU side, that's about the EU side. On the Balkan side, it's not much different. Like, Balkan politicians were never honest when they were talking about improving the lives of their people. Like, they never wanted to really change the situation. So we spoke about this morning about identity and things like that. There's one very nice graffiti in Skopje, which sums up my identity, I would say. You introduced me like proud Macedonian. I'm neither proud, I'm neither Macedonian, but nevertheless, never mind. So there's one graffiti in Skopje, which I think summarizes all our identities. It says, I'll say it first in Macedonian, then I'll translate it in English. It says, po nacionalnost sum siromav, which means my nationality is poor. And I think that's the real point. That's our nationality. We are all poor in the Balkans. If you look at the poverty rates, it's about 20% everywhere in the region. And we know that. And we know that it's been like that since the time immemorial, since I remember, economic data and whatever, it's been like that. And it never changes. All the politicians all the time speak about poverty, we have to alleviate it, we have to eradicate it. They never do anything about it. Why? Because it's their modus vivendi, it's their way of staying in power. So when they have poverty, poor, empty stomach is easy to bribe. So they maintain poverty intentionally so that they can buy elections through clientelism, which Philip mentioned. So you need poverty because in that way you can stay in power, you can bribe people, you can tell them, vote for me, I will employ you, vote for me, I'll give you this. So what I want to say is that the Balkan politicians were also never honest in their, when they were saying like we want to improve the life of our people, or whatever, improve the economic situation in our region. So what I would trying to summarize, what I'm saying is that we have like nothing ever changes in the Balkans. It's not getting any better. It won't get any better anytime soon. The reason is that we, on the both sides, on the EU side and on the Balkan side, we don't have honesty. Nobody really wants to improve things. And because I spoke too much, maybe I'll leave it for the next round, saying what I think we can be done at least to improve situation.
Branimir plays this pride role of Advocatus Diaboli very well, but this is a kind of honest wake-up call to ask right questions. And I think the first step in understanding something and finding a cure for a problem is to ask the right questions and to see what's the diagnosis. And I think many points that you made, and I mean, they are backed up by statistics, these kind of convergence numbers, but those are the numbers of clientelism, corruption, waste money, or money that is wasted, public money and public goods that is wasted in projects like, I don't know what, Belgrade Waterfront, Skopje 2014, now Expo or whatever. I mean, this is really huge and tremendous. Also like highways in Prishtina, in Kosovo, etc., etc. But now to the second round, and a quick one before we open up. I mean, we promised to offer, I mean, it's short before Christmas, you know, kids write the letters to the Christ child to bring some presents. We also can have some wishful thinking, but a realistic wishful thinking. So I would just love to ask you if you would have a kind of a magic stick to introduce one short-term measure to change something that is hurting the most, what will be that one? And what will be the magic stick for the long-term kind of? Where would you invest if you would like to have Western Balkans not joining or managing or convergence, reaching convergence in 150 years, but in 20 years? So a kind of a magic stick for the immediate, I mean, whatever, like for tomorrow, what will be that measure, that step, and what will be a long-term step from Thomas' position of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to open next few chapters?
Sorry, I forgot my crystal ball at the Ministry.
But a short.
But I will try at least. I think the magic one would be if you would have a better, like, a political agreement that the future of the country is the EU. Because this is sometimes lacking in the countries and they play political games with the EU integration. And I think you have to have a broad consensus with all political parties and also civil society and all the actors that this is where we want to go. Because otherwise it just makes it very hard, and then this very technically EU things, they become political points. And we see this in North Macedonia, how it plays out, and it's very, it's not very, it's really dangerous, and it's not working very well. So I think this would be the one that is key to have this real consensus as a society where you wanna go. And in the end, the EU can only be the answer. The Western Balkans are surrounded by EU member states, and I agree with some of your points made about the European Union. And this is the discussion we have in the European Union ourselves, of course, and it's an ever-changing project, but we have to step up to the plate and do it. And I think for the medium term, I think this economic convergence is the real point, because the whole Western Balkans now with 70 million have the GDP of between Slovakia and Portugal now. And this is a real economic failure. And but if you look, for example, at Romania, Romania has productivity gains as soon as they entered the Union in 2007, like China. So you see it economically, there is a difference if you, and I was posted to Bulgaria, I saw it there as well. there is real economic progress, and as John F. Kennedy said once, you know, a higher tide lifts all boats automatically. So I think this is the real one, and the gradual integration into the single market, because this is the potential, and the single market is not open to competition of the Western Balkans and vice versa. And there's a lot of small measures that you can take. SEPA, the Single European Payment System, it's a huge thing actually, because people pay 10% for just to wire some money from one country to the other, something we have forgotten about it, but I am old enough to still remember it, that this was the case before. And I think this is where the money would be, and this would also really change also the society from within.
Thank you, Thomas. Marigona?
I think the first one for me would be very easy, really, like resolving the issues with Serbia. I mean, that would definitely be an immediate, very much needed thing that would help Kosovo, but also Serbia, so both countries to move forward towards EU integration and further development. And the other one would be definitely, I mean, for Kosovo and more like long-term, would be for all of our countries to really join EU and join this EU that I mentioned, that is kind of like sticking to the values that it tries to promote, and not an EU that is, you know, like having this neo-colonial approach, as Branimir mentioned, or having this, you know, like democratic backsliding within itself as well. And of course, I mean, I think it's given that once our countries, of course, would join EU, there is this, you know, like this perception in our societies that all of our issues, you know, like this lengthy process, this all the reforms that EU requires from us. Then once we are in, we are kind of like, it was also mentioned here that, you know, like it's this promised land, and then we will all be happy, you know, like moving on with our lives. But we see from other experiences, and especially with Croatia as the last one joining, that especially on a lot of issues with regards to, you know, like dealing with the past, justice, human rights, it doesn't resolve all of our issues. And once we go in, there is still, you know, like once we get in, there is still a lot of work that needs to be done. But I think it's long term, that would be, I mean, an ideal solution for Kosovo, but also for the region, you know, like to join this, the union, and to continue, you know, like working together and prospering together as, and also, you know, like trying to defend ourselves from external China, Russia influences and interferences, and I think that's going to be very important as we move on, considering this geopolitical landscape in the world.
Thanks, Marigona. Philip.
Well, Vedran, you wanted us to be crispy. I'll try to be short and crispy. So the first one. You know, a few months ago, the British newspaper, The Economist, published an article with the title, "Why is the West always backing wrong leaders in Southeast Asia?" And there the journalist wrote that the leaders and politicians in Southeast Asia, they learned a very important skill, especially those who are Western educated, that they just need to say things that Western leaders want them to say, and then they will not pay attention to what they are doing back home. So, and I think this is very applicable to Western Balkans. So,
though they didn't enjoy the education in the West, but still.
But they also learn. I think so. And so basically, if you say that you are against corruption and that you are against nationalism, and if you happen to be Western educated and you know how to present this, you will have their full support. after 2 years, as my friend, I will not name my friend who works for German Ministry of Foreign Affairs, after 2 years, suddenly they realized, wow, Western Balkan politicians, they lie. Okay, yes, they do. So please pay attention what they are doing back home. So not what they are telling you, but what they are doing back home, because they learned, even though who were anti-EU, they learned they need to say that they are for EU, like in my home country, like the president of parliament of my home country. But then you will have the situation like in Georgia, where you have party who is saying that is pro-EU, and then they win the election, and then they say, okay, we're not going to join the EU. So pay attention before it's too late what they are doing home. The long-term one is to understand the power of nationalism. I think the nationalism is the source of almost all evil in the Balkans. But in this regard, I'm very pessimistic, because I see that many leaders in Western countries, they don't understand the power of nationalism, even though they are increasingly being faced with nationalist forces in their own countries. So this is why I'm not very, very optimistic that they will understand how important nationalism is in political dynamics of Western Balkan countries.
Thank you so much. That was short, crispy, and to the point. Tara?
Still trying to be optimistic, right? Okay, I love this mental. I really like this mental exercise. Short term, when it comes to Serbia first, but also to the rest of our region, in the short term, I would just wave the wand, and I would ask to have media freedom, complete media freedom, and open public discussion in which you can really genuinely hear different voices, different thinking, public space for discussion and media. This is the thing that, first of all, we need in Serbia, but also in the Western Balkans. And on the side of Europe, in the short term, alliances. For instance, European Democratic Shield is a buzzword. We're hearing a lot about the European Democratic Shield in Brussels in the last couple of weeks. I would love to hear more about how to strengthen the democracy within, with more participation, more citizen engagement, not only on the side of European Union countries, but pan-European alliances, which include also the enlargement countries. So we don't only need to have more access to funds, we need to have more of our access to our voices being heard and engaged within the side of European processes as well. On the long run, this leads me to, and I really like the idea, if we would have all these magic wands, we would solve all the problems together. I guess one of the things that I didn't hear so far, on the long run, I would ask and wish for more genuine deliberation, democratic innovations, and participation of the citizens. I think we need to have more faith in the people and in the citizens. And I think that deliberation, but also citizen participation, holds a lot of transformative power that we're not aware of. And I think this is something that our democracy needs on the Western Balkans, but also in the European Union level.
Good, Branimir.
So we have two things, but I'll try to be short. One on the EU, one on the Balkan side, as I was saying before. On the EU side, I'll top up on what Philip was saying. I agree with that, but I think that's not the whole story. I think it's not just that the Western or EU politicians don't know what Balkan politicians are like. I think it's also that they don't care too much about it. There's this idea of stabilitocracy, or whatever you want to call it. I think that explains to a great extent the support that some autocratic leaders like Vučić, for example, are receiving from the West. And Tara was too nice to say that Germany is probably supporting Vučić exactly because of lithium. I would say it openly, at least that's my opinion. I think that Germany is very willing to have Vučić in power because he is giving them what they want. It's not now, it's lithium. Before it was not lithium, it was low taxes for their companies and tax exemptions, tax holidays for 10 years, you don't pay any taxes, low labor costs, like low wages, everything, whatever you want, you don't have to follow any standards, come here, invest, we are a heaven for investors. So I think that's part of the story that we also have to understand. So what I would like to see on EU side is not to think only in terms of transactional, let's put it that way, what we get from the Balkans and what we give you in return, but think more about fundamental issues. Like they really need to start of supporting in a way, walk the walk in a way, or so far they're just talking. I want to see them more walking the talk they're talking. Like if they're talking about democracy, support the democratic factors, actors, fighters, whatever that you have in the region. coming back to the elephant in the room, Serbia. Like last year, there were elections in Serbia. If the opposition could unify, could get its terms together, they could win Belgrade, and the situation now would be different. But that didn't happen. And if you ask me, one of the reasons that it didn't happen is that the EU didn't want it to happen or didn't do anything to support the opposition. So what I would like to see from EU side is more sincere engagement in this concrete sense. Like think about the fundamentals, like the real issues, and try to support those people, whatever you want to call them, in the society which can really deliver this democracy or whatever you want to call it. Now on the Balkan side, what I want, because I'm also an economist. Now again, like it's not really a joke, but there's this saying by Einstein, allegedly by Einstein, that stupidity is doing the same thing again and again and hoping to see a different outcome. So I would say, if you accept this definition of stupidity, I would say that economic policymakers in the Balkans in the last 30 years have been extremely stupid. Why? Because they are doing the same policies over and over again, hoping to get a different outcome, and they see that nothing ever changes. Like all the time, like FDI, attract FDI, low wages, low taxes, free markets, don't do anything, don't intervene in the economy, nothing. Laissez-faire, markets know best, whatever you want to call it. And nothing happens, just poverty, increases inequality, increases, education goes down, healthcare goes down, people leave the country, things just get worse and worse, and they continue with the same policies. So what I want to see is that we finally realize that we have a problem with the economic model that we adopted 30 years ago, this neoliberal economic model that I explained before, and we start replacing that model. We start replacing that model with a real, you can call it social democratic or whatever you want to call it model, which means like greater involvement of the state in the economy, meaning, of course, first, greater investment in public goods and services like education and healthcare, then greater investment in infrastructure and all these things like hospitals, roads, railway, renewable energy, all this kind of stuff. And for me, the most important thing is industrial policy. We had industrial policy in Yugoslavia, at least in the ex-socialist countries, like 30 years ago in socialist times. We had an extreme version of industrial policy, meaning the state was choosing which industries, which sectors you would support. We forgot about it. We forgot about it after socialism went down. We had industrial policy in Austria, like 50 years ago after the Second World War. We had it in every developed country, and it's a big issue now also in the EU. Many of you probably know the Draghi report, which came out like half a year ago, several months ago. Mario Draghi, the former governor of the Italian central bank, you know him, and prime minister. And he also, the report he published about the state of affairs of competitiveness in EU is about industrial policy. So he says EU now has problems because it forgot about industrial policy. So the same story that we have about the EU, I want to see it in the Balkans. I want to see that economic policymakers and politicians start talking about this and start saying that we need to involve, to get into the details of how we run the economies. Meaning we select the sectors. We say Macedonia will be a country which will be based on, I don't know, agriculture, food, textile industry, tourism, IT. Select the sectors and say we will develop these sectors in this way. Then I'm just giving an example. So greater involvement of the state in these affairs. So yeah, that would be my, just to repeat, on the Western Balkan side, realize that the economic model that we have right now is bad and replace it with a more fundamental economic model which deals more with the fundamentals of society and gets the state more into these affairs. And on the EU side, like more sincere involvement in terms of walking the talk that they are doing right now.
Thank you so much. You see, even though the year has been ongoing for quite some time and we are now approaching the end of the year, there is a lot of enthusiasm and ideas on the panel on how to move forward, be it with or without magic sticks. But I think all those issues are important to be taken into account when they can even be translated into policies in the end. So it's now time to open up for you and your questions and remarks. And as I said, you just experienced a quick and crispy panel. So please, quick and crispy, short questions. Introduce yourself, pose a question or a short comment. We are going to collect 2 or 3, 4 questions and remarks and then bring it back to the panel for the first round. And I think we still have some time. It might be that we manage a second round too. So Jun, short and crispy.
Jun Saito, and now I'm writing about my doctoral thesis.
It doesn't work, I think, the mic too.
Thank you. So, Jun Saito, I am now writing a doctoral thesis on Austrian policy for the Western Balkans. That's why I want to ask several questions to
Not several. You have to choose one or two.
Okay, only
several
one.
Is too many.
Okay, then two
short.
Okay, only one question to you. So, did Austria build the non-paper gradual integration on the new policy strategy endorsed in 2020? Because in this paper, we have read already the idea of some integration or participation of progress to Western Balkan countries in a particular policy area. And the second question is, you for and also VEDRAN, how do you evaluate the effectiveness of new enlargement strategy of Commission? So it is really much more better effect on the reform in so-called your countries or Western Balkans. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So there is, I think, in the second row, lady.
Yep. Thank you for the panel. I'm Sončica. I'm majoring in economics and data science at CEU. I have only one question, but for the 2 points mentioned by Thomas and Philip, but any of you can answer. So I think Thomas mentioned this decoupling between formal compliance and technical implementation. And then Philip also mentioned institutions being captured by clientelism networks. So I think that we have often come across EU conditionality in the Western Balkans being rather checklisty and potentially entrenching corruption. So my question is how to prevent EU conditionality entrenching clientelism networks in the Western Balkans. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. I saw two more hands in the back here. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Hilda Kolevska from the Embassy of North Macedonia. I think this is more a comment. My country is a really unique case, having in mind that next year we mark 20 years since we were granted the candidate status. And it was here mentioned that the support is not that big or that the society is split. I would not agree with that. I would say it's a fact that the support of the EU has dropped. We had around, Branimir knows maybe better, 70–80% support of the EU when we got the candidate status. Now it is, I don't know, 40–50%. But we have to ask, why is that the case? I think that is because actually we have a moving target in front of us. I still can remember when we were filling the questionnaire, there was enthusiasm in the administration, in all the ministries. We were working until late in the evening. And what happened then? We had to change the constitution once, twice. We had to change the flag. We had to change even our name, you know, in 2017. And now we still cannot see that there is some good perspective for us because we get very strange criteria. So that is why now the enthusiasm for EU has decreased. So what we want to have is actually a predictable and merit-based EU accession process. So to know that if we do reforms, that then we really can walk or have a future step towards the EU. So that is, I think that is the reason why there is a disappointment within the population. And that is why the support for the EU has decreased, for my country at least.
Thank you. That's a clear message. And I think we all understand the disappointment in North Macedonia. There was one more question behind, and here in the second row we can take this one and then make a first round of answers on the panel.
I'll be quick. Good evening. My name is Samir Beharic. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Bamberg and research officer with the Balkan Forum and activist from JEHIČ. One quick question to Branimir. Branimir, you said half of the group here is probably from the Balkans. I think if they heard your presentation, it would have been a full room. To be honest, I haven't heard like this kind of gloomy overview of the Balkans in a long time, and I was waiting at the end that there might be some kind of a kick in the end, some kind of a... I would ask you a bit harder question than Vedran asked you. If a young person would ask you, why would we need to stay in the Balkans? What would you say? Because based on what you said, there are no much reasons to stay there. Thanks.
Great. Probably to listen to better jokes than in Germany. No, that's a bad one. Yes, the fifth one, and then we come back.
Doug Wake, former U.S. diplomat and OSCE official, including in Belgrade, both at the mission many years ago and observing elections not too long ago. A couple of you have mentioned just in passing the war in Ukraine and role of Russia in the Balkans, but haven't put much emphasis on it. And at least from the outside perspective, it seems that the war and the invitation to Ukraine, Moldova to join the European Union actually was quite important also in kickstarting the process with the Balkans. And what I'm wondering, if you put that crystal ball back in front of you, to what extent do those processes involving particularly Ukraine over the next several years present opportunities for Balkan integration to move more quickly? To what extent maybe also risks that Balkans somehow get left out again as focus is on these bigger picture frontline issues in European geopolitics? Okay, good. Branimir, do you wanna start?
Yeah, of course.
I mean, I could also rephrase the question and ask why you are so spreading depression and so there's no.
Well, I can't do anything else. But yeah, I mean, there are basically two reasons why you should stay in the Balkans. The first is the food. The second one is the weather. Of course, I'm kidding. Of course, I think that's much better than here. But no, what my serious answer is, I had this conversation like 5 years ago with a famous artist from the Balkans. I won't give the name. And asked him, why are you staying in the Balkans? He said, he told me like artistically, poetically, if you want, like, I don't want to sing to happy people. And I would say, I kind of identify with it. Like, you know, life here is okay, like formally looking, everything kind of works. There are many problems, sure, but still people here are living well. You don't have like political purpose living in Austria, at least so far for me. When I was living in Macedonia, I was, you know, like you, active in social movements, you know. Even if when I was arrested once, I had this sense of purpose that I'm doing something for, not for the country in a nationalistic sense. I don't care about this. All nations are imaginations, but for people, for the life, for the way people live. So I always had this feeling when I was living in Macedonia that my life has some purpose. I'm contributing. I'm poor. You know, I struggle with healthcare, with pollution, with whatever every day. But at least I feel that I'm kind of trying to change a bit. I'm trying to push the stone, the Sisyphus stone, you know, to the top of the mountain. Here, I never have that feeling. Here, like, I feel that, you know, I'm climbing the mountain, going down again, climbing, going, no stone, no nothing. No suffering, no happiness, no nothing. There you have both suffering and you have happiness. So that would be that.
New interpretation of Albert Camus. So it's Thank you. So next time we organize a conference on Albert Camus, so we invite Branimir to reinterpret. So Tara, do you want to address any of the questions, or you just pass?
Maybe just one quick thing. Yeah, I think I was living abroad for some years, and now when Branimir said it, that's completely true. But I think maybe if I can follow up on this, I think while living in the Balkans, because the winter is coming and we are ready for it, or to put it differently, I think that with everything which is going on now in Serbia, and maybe it wasn't clear enough, I think that there is a lot of threats that we are facing. There is a lot of them that we didn't mention today because we just have a crispy and quick panel and there is not enough time to address all of it. But I think at the same time, the reason of my optimism, although I'm still living there, is that you can actually hear the voices of the people who demand the things which are written in the enlargement. And you were asking how you can make sure that the enlargement is not just being ticking the box. I think we are actually being given, for instance, now in Serbia, we are actually being given a gift in which you hear the people who demand these reforms to be implemented. We don't need only the laws to be changed in the parliament, passed through and then tick the box. We need the implementation of these laws in reality. And for this thing, it's not enough just to have people within the country who demand it. We need the support from the outside who will push the institutions and who will push the actors who are grasping the power and actually capturing all the power at the moment to do it in reality. So I think that the gift that we have now in the Western Balkans, because the winter is coming, we are the ones who can actually experience the resilience of the people who are demanding this kind of democracy and who can actually show that there is grassroots demand for values, for institutions who are working, for anti-corruption, for free media, for different voices to be heard. The thing that we need at this moment by the winter magic of Christmas is solidarity and alliances from the outside who can show that there is support for these voices and that we are being heard.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Tara. Philip.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I like VEDRAN too much, so I'll be very short. Don't want him to be mad at me. Sunčić's question. Well, I'm a political scientist, so also at the CEU, by the way. And I'm interested in clientelism from the perspective of political sciences, meaning from the perspective of elections. So I think that clientelism is used as a tool to unlevel the playing field. So what they are doing is that you misuse state resources to buy votes, to provide jobs for loyalists, party activists, and so on. And this is how you ensure that you will be re-elected in the next election. So what can you do about this? I think by promoting the notion that free and fair elections are a precondition for the membership in the EU, I think in this way you can also tackle clientelism. So this would be my I would say reply from the perspective of a political scientist. Regarding Doug's question on Ukraine, to be honest, I don't think that Montenegro would have opened 3 chapters yesterday without Putin invading Ukraine. Honestly, I don't think so. So I think the Ukraine made the EU realize that we really need to do something about Western Balkans. So I think this is the main for Western Balkans. This is, I would say, the main impact of the. There are many impacts, but I would say, or at least for Montenegro, this is the main impact of the war, of Russia's war against Ukraine.
Thanks, Philip. Marigona, do you think that there is anything that you can mention? I mean, the question on the impact of the war in Ukraine on Kosovo-Serbian relations might be something that you would or could pick up on.
Yeah, I mean, that's when the invasion of Ukraine started. Of course, it caused a lot of fear in the region, but especially in Kosovo and Bosnia and Herzegovina, because of these as being, like still the hotspots in terms of like the ethnic tension that still continue to exist. So, of course, I mean, that being said, this has caused a lot of fear, a lot of trauma among the people, but also a lot of ground for politicians, both in Kosovo and Serbia, to kind of like use their discourse to kind of like continue instilling this fear that we might be the next conflict erupting in this part of the world. And of course, we've seen a lot of Russian propaganda, a lot of Russian interference, kind of like going on in the region. Russia meddling in the region, particularly through Serbia and Serbian fractions that exists across the region. So, I mean, Ukraine is the war in Ukraine and how it's going to end. Hopefully, very soon, it's going to be very detrimental also for how Kosovo-Serbia relations will continue, or how Kosovo and Serbia kind of like will resolve their issues. But I think that's also going to impact how we put an end to also other, let's say, open conflicts in the Balkans.
Thank you. Thomas, have been one or two questions directly addressed to you.
Yeah, perfect. Maybe I start also on this Ukraine, but this is of course the central change that happened, the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine, because this put enlargement back at front and center. This is also, I think we would not, I mean, this is speculation, but we wouldn't have this Friends of the Western Balkans group I previously mentioned that we are founders and a big part of. We wouldn't have it with the old picture. So because we are very arguing within the EU that there must not be two classes of candidate countries. They all have to be treated equally on their own merits and so on. Because we saw this dynamism happening where Ukraine made steps in the enlargement process where other countries waited for some reasons, and the colleague mentioned it, for bilateral issues, actually with North Macedonia 20 years without any some progress, but not nearly enough, which explains then the decrease of support for the European Union. And then on the gradual integration, this is also something we had to argue for a lot, because the Commission, it's like a very heavy tanker, and this is also, but this is my personal opinion, the EU is no magic wand or like a solution to all the problems. The EU is made up of institutions, and the European Commission is it's like a super tanker. You have to, for them to change position, it takes them a long time, but once they are there, they go in this direction. And with this gradual integration, we had to do a lot of convincing that this really that this is a way to go. Also, that this is not an alternative to full membership, but it's just on the way to make like the advantages accessible to citizens earlier, so that they see this process pays off. And also it was mentioned the financial points. I mean, this 6 billion now, it sounds a lot. Actually, it's not. From a European perspective in the budget, when you see the region, it's and your point is precisely right about this lack, because it's still a foreign financial instrument and not comparable to the cohesion funds and social funds we use within the European Union. And this is also something where we have to be honest about as EU and member states, of course. So this is and this is a discussion we continue to be having. The faster you are, the shorter the discussion will be. So we really hope that we could see in the coming years some candidate countries finish the accession negotiations and then be ready to join. And this is also our position, that there should not be, so there's this parallel discussion that you have within the EU about internal reform. So in a nutshell, we have to reform ourselves first before we take on new members. And this is a view we do not share. So we say everybody on their own merits, and as soon as possible, this should happen. Thank you.
Thanks. Are there like 2 or 3 small last interventions here? I see Hannes and then the gentleman sitting behind Hannes directly. Yes, George.
Yeah, Hannes SWOBODA. A brief remark and then a question to Thomas. What you said, Branimir, in the end, I think is very important. And this was the reason why I personally, when I came into the European Parliament, was interested to go to the Balkans, because you can fight for something. And I think this is the big mistake also, EU in general. We are no longer fighting for anything. Even on Ukraine, we send military, but do we really engage the citizens that this is a big fight we have to fight, because it's about a threat to our freedom and our security. I think this is a big mistake, and therefore I wanted to really to support very much what you said, and including also the Ukraine issue. My specific question is to Thomas, to you. You speak as if the gradual integration is happening. Is it really happening? I don't see it really. I mean, I very much support what you said and the initiative, because I still think it's the only way to do it. But I think we have to push much more that this is happening. I agree with your evaluation of the Commission from the position of the European Parliament. I would even include sometimes the Council also. But I think we should push much more to have that concept you proposed very much implemented. That's it.
Thank you. So, yes.
My name is Paul Jankovic. I'm an independent consultant now after many years in industry. But being an economist, I enjoyed what you said, Branimir. But there is a question which goes through my mind, and that is, you were saying that there's a neo-colonial approach towards these countries. And I just wondered, how do you assess the behavior of Russia, but also China, or even more? I have done a lot of projects in Bosnia and Herzegovina, where you have the Saudi Arabia, you have Qatar, you have Jordania. They come in and they do all sorts of things. And the question is, how is that seen by people? Maybe by the elites. They would be probably happy that somebody is building a road or whatever, a railway or something. But the question is there any feedback or any, let's say, talk or discussion in the society? And as I said, that goes through my mind when I was listening to you, so I would be interested to hear your impressions. Thank you.
Thank you. There is one last, two last questions. Two last questions. 3. 2.
Larissa Lojic. I'm part of the Western Balkan Initiative, so I was also part of the workshop today, but I'm also an economist to be, and because the new growth plan for the Western Balkans was mentioned, and I also wrote my thesis about it just recently, so I had 2 questions. First of all, I mean, on the volume of it, if we think of, if I remember correctly, I think Croatia only got 6 billion from the cohesion fund, and now we have 6 billion for 6 countries. Does it really make sense? And then also, I think I would really like Branimir's opinion on this, because I do believe that the idea of having these reform plans is a good one, but what can we do that we don't have the Western Balkans just ending up being dependent market economies like we have right now in Central Eastern Europe? So they will be part of the single market, but they're mostly just used for a place as, like, you will not have the headquarters there. The most money will be still made in Western European countries, and what can we do to prevent this?
Thank you. And if I'm not mistaken, that was a hand, huh? Yes. Or yes.
I think I don't need the mic.
You need it for the recording, but even if you have the strongest voice.
That's why. So, thanks so much. My name is Moges Tashoma. I'm a researcher and a PhD candidate at the University of Vienna. Just one quick remark and a question. One of the panelists raised that without the Russian invasion of Ukraine, it would have been impossible, or at least the process would have been sluggish in terms of moving forward with accession. And I agree with that statement, that much of the most important things in history, political history, happened because of a cognitive punch, just to borrow the word from one philosopher, in a sense that you use the crisis as an opportunity to make fundamental structural changes. So I relate to that remark. That said, my question is to the panelist from Albania, or who was talking about Albania. I was reading that Albania is making every effort possible to make it happen by 2013, which means only 5 years from now. Particularly in the sector of justice and rule of law, Albania has been scoring quite low, I would say, values, as has been assessed as per the global justice framework, as well as the EU package itself. So is that so realistic in 5 years? Thanks so much.
Good, that's a general question. There was no one from Albania on the panel, but George can also, he is originally from Albania, he can probably answer and say a sentence. George, we want to have you on the spotlight.
Of course. I'm used to it by now. So you're correct. Rama, the Prime Minister, actually wanted to, he's already proposed 2030 as the year that we're supposed to join the EU. I do think that's ambitious, and you're very correct in the fact that corruption rates within law has been on the rise. However, something that I know for a fact actually, every single police department and every single judicial system and employee within the Albanian region at the moment is nowadays being replaced. The reason why that is because they would rather have younger individuals step in. Now the problem is a bit systematic. This is still a party system, so therefore all of these individuals would still be from the party that is in power, that is the Socialist Party, Prime Minister Edi Rama's party. So that kind of just shows that perhaps we're not necessarily going away from that pattern of, which is the problem, I guess. In terms of corruption overall, yes. I mean, that is kind of a commonality, if you will, within the region. And as an ambassador, it feels very shameful to say that corruption guy is bad. But yeah, I think it is ambitious. I don't necessarily see it pulling through. However, purely for economic reasons, going back to what we said before, Montenegro is definitely on the forefront, but also Albania has been doing quite well on that regard, especially with the rise of tourism, as I mentioned. So I definitely do see why there would be an incentive there, and I definitely do see why it is in the priority compared to the rest of the region. Also, this is something that I brought up in the workshop. We don't necessarily have that national division right there as much as we have it in the rest of the region. So I do think that in that regard, Albania could be seen as a bit more peaceful, which sounds interesting to kind of collaborate with corruption. But yeah, so I don't know. For the sake of myself, I hope so. Reality, we'll see. Yeah.
Great. So a peaceful and corrupt country on a way to join the European Union in 2030. That's good. Yeah. So let's have the last concluding round, and just as an announcement, so the International Institute for Peace, as you see, is a wonderful place, wonderful discussions, but before Christmas there is also an opportunity to celebrate a bit. There are kind of small snacks and drinks provided by the International Institute for Peace, and you are invited, Hannes, if you want to say a word afterwards, and invite all our guests to the buffet. Having said that, you guys stand between the Christmas festivities and now the discussion. So it's up to you to finish rather fast, but as interesting as possible. Branimir, you were addressed several times.
Yeah, okay. So the comparison between EU and Russia, China. So I would say that there's no big difference there. China and Russia do not invest in the Balkans because of altruism. Of course, they have their own interests, and that's all they care about. Maybe there is one small difference in the sense that they are more strategic when they are doing. They think more strategically when they are doing that, other than the EU. The EU doesn't think so strategically. So I think that's a smaller difference. I think that's actually the very core of the problem, essence of the problem, that the EU is not much better than Russia and China when it comes to investing in the Balkans. And Balkan politicians and people know that. And that's why for Vučić, it's not much more, interesting to work. He doesn't have I don't know how to call it, a better interest to work with EU investment than with Chinese investment. He tells you it's the same. It's a factory. I don't care if the owner is, China, Russia, I don't know, Uganda, whatever. It's a factory. People will work. I will get some money into the pocket. That's all I care about. So I think that's the essence of the problem, that you have to understand that it has to be better than Russia and China when it comes to working with the Balkans, that the Balkan politicians and people would like to work more with the EU than with the others. So I think that's the essence of the from. Very briefly on the new growth plan and comparison with Croatia, just a small number. Yes, I agree with you on that. I would even say that it's not I mean, the numbers you gave are even like, inflated when it comes to the Balkans, because this 6 billion for the Balkans are comprise 2 billion of grants and 4 billion of loans, whereas the money that Croatia got from the EU is 6 billion of grants. So if you look at per capita terms and everything, Croatia is getting 12 times more than the Western Balkans in terms of grants, because it's 5 times smaller than the Balkans, but it gets 3 times than the Western Balkans, but it gets 3 times more in terms of grants. So I think that illustrates the difference when it comes to the money that EU is giving to its current member states and to the Western Balkans. I'll stop here.
Thanks. Who else wants to? Thomas, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, the EU, we give it to ourselves, no? So we are in Austria here, we're a net payer. And this was the 6 billion. I agree, of course, with the point, I see it, but this was done with the review of the multi-annual financial framework. And this was there, basically. On gradual integration, it's happening, but it's happening much too slowly. And the reason is also, and this, I think, this can be adapted, but it's a bit complicated, and I will not go into the details, but very briefly, the legal framework that we have with the Western Balkan 6 is very different from the one we have, for example, with Ukraine and Moldova, because they are agreements that were designed as an end stage, and the one for the Western Balkans, they are earlier agreements, and they were designed on the way to full membership. And so you can, the one with Ukraine and Moldova is much more flexible. You can make like this integration into the single market very easily. Technicality, it's a one page where you say, okay, this regulation XYZ applies for this free trade agreement. And it's much more complicated in the Western Balkans. We saw this when we tried to do something about the roaming and roaming between the EU and the region, and then within the region, where you had to have like the telecom operators themselves saying that they will lower the particular fees the people have to pay. So I think it's the future, but it's still a lot of work to be done, and it's also, I think it's the most technical thing, and I think you're already now for a Christmas party or ending it on gradual integration on the most boring subject probably. So
the Christmas party has a motto: gradual integration. So does anyone else wants to say something? No. Then I think there is. It was a crispy and quick discussion of 2 hours, and all of you stayed. So it's a testimony to the importance of the region, I said, and so testimony to the interesting points made on the panel. Some solutions, a bit of depression served by someone who is not a Pride Macedonian. Interesting insights, some optimism, but I think a lot of realism, and I think a lot of food for thought. Now there will be food for eating, and my only hope is, as I have been unfortunately in this business discussing the Balkans for more than 2 decades, and I remember when we discussed 2003 the Thessaloniki, and there's a huge promise, and then we keep repeating, coming back and discussing Kosovo, Serbia, and sometimes you have I got an impression that this is this kind of a movie, Groundhog Day. You just wake up and there's yet another discussion and you discuss. But I think what was unique today is the young voices in the workshop, interesting points made about education, about the progress that is possible, some interesting insights also from Serbia on how the bottom-up energies and grassroots initiatives can change the reality. And I think a lot of arguments for really sticking to not only to the hope, but to the practices of hope, which all of you outline in this kind of a short-term wonder sticks and magic sticks and long-term magic sticks. So the International Institute for Peace invites you to the small Christmas party at the Balkan Forum, the Austrian Institute for International Affairs and Renner-Institute. Thank you for visiting us. We will continue the initiative, so we will continue putting the young voices from the Western Balkans into the focus, because we do believe that Balkans belongs to Europe. I mean, it's not joining Europe, it's joining the European Union, it belongs to Europe, and the young voices are the shaper of this process. So that's for today. Thank you so much, and please enjoy the drinks and snacks served by the Institute. Thank you.